Ciao.
That's sponsored by Remote HQ. Collaborate like you're in the same room. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. That's Remote HQ.
Dare have an interplanet conference without me. They could at least have had the courtesy to invite me.
But Cleo,
Radio, Rob Walch. It's pretend radio. That's the thing about this show. I'm not saying that's what podcasting is. I'm saying that's what the thing is about this show. It's pretend radio. Because like yesterday I said, it's time for a commercial. And then I'm pretending like, and we're back with Rob Walch. You know Rob Walch. He's VP of Podcaster Relations at Libsyn and also host of Today in iOS. And he'll be spinning the smooth sounds as soon as I'm out of here or something. Funny thing is that we didn't actually talk about which thing we want to talk about. So we had said we were going to talk about the latest in iThings and operating systems for today's show. But being a podcaster and having, knock wood, because there are still 15 days, but having lived through 2020, which would you rather talk about? Do you want to go back to the Apple stuff, or do you want to talk about podcasts in 2020?
We can talk podcasting.
All right. Well, everybody, if you haven't heard of podcasts, settle in. Talk to me about this year in podcasting, because this year, I don't know how to talk about anything in this year. I mean, I do know that I did the thing that I kind of made fun of yesterday. In 2020, I started 2 new shows. One of those, though, I started about a month and a half before the lockdown. And the other one I started about 6 or 8 weeks ago. Did you see a tremendous uptick, first of all, from the business side, and then talk to me about what the face of the whole thing has looked like in this ghastly year?
We saw a tremendous uptake in the number of new shows, especially in the late spring and then early summer months. And then when COVID hit and during the lockdown started, we saw a tremendous drop off in consumption because people stopped commuting. But here was the interesting thing. The amount of drop in consumption was nowhere close to the drop in how people were commuting. Apple was tracking how people were commuting, and it was like an 85% drop in transit and a 50% drop in car travel for requesting directions. During that same time, we saw a drop in podcasting about 20%. And it came back sooner than the rebound on the transit. Well, transit really hasn't come back, but the rebound on the car direction requests.
So then talk to me about the shows that people are making. Was it like, finally I can make that bread show? Or, did you see
too many true crime podcasts, right?
Wait, are you saying that, or are you asking? Because I've never listened to a single one. Although, again, turning to Twitter for my comedy, somebody did say recently, gosh, I hope someday somebody does a true crime podcast, which I thought was hilarious because,
I actually started a true crime podcast more for fun. And it was called Meta Monday Murders. And it's about a serial killer who only kills true crime podcasters. And he does it on Monday mornings between 5 and 8 a.m. Okay.
Yeah. You actually started this, or you're joking with me?
Well, I got the promo up there. I mean, you can go search for Meta Monday Murders Meta Monday Murdercast is actually the technical title of the show.
Okay. And do you come in going,
Well, it's not just that they get killed on Monday mornings. They get killed with a Harry's razor.
Oh, that's cute. I like that. No, the thing was the Meta Monday murder. It's it's a good podcast. Good, you might say. So when people are home, and they think, well, I've got all this time to do this now, are they then talking about, what their true passion is? Are they looking for, I see this makes a lot of money, I will make that kind of thing? Did they lean into the COVID thing and lean into the politics thing? Because those were both huge this year. Another thing that might have spurred some people, the Black Lives Matter movement came on hard in late May and early June because of course, of the murder of George Floyd. I mean, there are all kinds of things that might have been an impetus, not the least of which is, well, I can't go anywhere anyway. I mean, was there a trend in the kinds of shows that people were creating?
It really was all over the place. So it was everything. There were people that looked at charts and said, oh, these are the most popular, these are the ones making money, I'm going to go into those areas, they're no longer podcasting. But there were people that went after what they were passionate about. And the more they were actually passionate about it, the more likely they are still podcasting today. But it was covering all things. And there were political podcasts, of course, on all realms of the spectrum. But the ones that do the best are the ones where people actually do a show about something that they really love and they want to do research on and can, or they already know and already were a topic that was part of their life. People doing it for work-related reasons. They're an electrical engineer and they start doing stuff on engineering-related topics, things like that. Those podcasts don't get very large audiences usually, but they get passionate audiences because the host is passionate. But there are people that do or did get into this space with the thought that they were going to make a lot of money. And for the most part, that doesn't happen.
Let me ask you really quickly, what are you finding for discoverability at this point? Because I know I had Adam Christensen on telling his origin story as far as the Maccast. And he basically secretly did a show. There were, of course, no directories or any place you could go. And then he got an email from somebody in another country who had just found him without any kind of real podcast directory. And I guess back in the day, if you were looking for a podcast, they were so sparse that it was almost easier to find them, although you wouldn't necessarily find it, categorized and labeled and rated and all of that stuff. Flash forward and there's, 1.5 million podcasts in the iTunes App Store. In the Apple Podcasts, even though most of them are dead, as you pointed out, I guess, on yesterday's show. What are you finding these days as far as discoverability goes?
Well, like Adam, I started before with another podcast called Podcast 411. I started that in 2004, like Adam did. And it was tough for people to find you. Now, anywhere people can listen to audio, they can find podcasts. And discoverability is a lot easier if your podcast is named around the topic that you're actually covering. People that do podcasts that are
you saying in a few minutes was a bad idea, Rob? Are you saying in a few minutes? Yeah.
It's tough to be discovered if your podcast isn't named for the topic, because people search and discover things, and it's based on what's in the title of your show, and what's in the author tag of your show, and then it's sorted by the total number of subscribers all time. That's how Apple Podcasts works, and most of the other search engines work based on what's in the title of the show. Some, like Spotify, only I think looks at what's in the title of your show. So podcasts, there isn't a discoverability issue in podcasting today. Some people would say there is, but there really isn't, because think about it. Every service people listen to audio, you find podcasts in now. Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Deezer, for people outside the U.S., Ghana, Ngami. They all have podcasts in them. 8 of the top 10 music streaming services in the world have podcasts. And of the 2 that don't, one is in China and the other one is Apple Music, which doesn't need to have podcasts because you have Apple Podcasts. So really, 8 of the 9 that could have a podcast directory do.
Coming up, Rob and I share our advice for would-be podcasters. First, though, a word from Remote HQ, letting you collaborate as if you were in the same room. A while ago, I went to another city, a couple of cities away. It took about an hour and a half. I went there for a meeting, which we could have done over the phone, except we all wanted to be able to access a whiteboard. We wanted to be able to share our physical notes. Today, we might do it for the company because we're all social distancing. Of course, we can't because we're all social distancing. If that meeting was happening today, we could do it with Remote HQ. Remote HQ gives your group access to the kinds of things you'd have if you were together. A whiteboard anybody can write on, a shared web browser anybody can control, notes anyone can add to, plus access to apps your team already uses like Google Docs, Miro, Dropbox, and others. So even if you can't be together, you can work together like you're together. Try it yourself. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. Give Remote HQ a try. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. Now let's do Podcasting 101 with Podcast 411's Rob Walch. All right, I said earlier that I have advice for people who want to start a podcast, and I'm happy to share with you what my advice is. I really want to hear yours. If somebody gets in touch with you and says, do you mind if I go ahead and actually do mine? Because I would rather end on your advice. Yours, yes. Do it, and do it again, and do it some more. If you think you're going to produce one episode a week, produce a month worth of podcasts, and know that nobody may ever hear it. Don't produce it thinking this has to be perfect. You're producing those for, first of all, to work out the kinks, and second, to make sure that at the end of a month, it is actually something you want to do. And if you found it difficult in that month at any time, do it again. And I don't mean you found it difficult to do it audio-wise, because you can always fix that. And if your microphone sucks, you can always buy a new microphone. If you found it difficult to think about what you're going to talk about in the third week, or you found yourself dreading it, do it for another month before you launch. Because if you don't get over that, there's going to come a week where you just don't do it anymore. Or you think, well, I'm going to do that in a couple of weeks. And then you're going to feel bad. And that's the thing. I've started enough shows and stopped enough shows at this point that if something doesn't work out, I will actually stand back and look at it and go, God, I love that show. I really wish that had worked out for me. But I got to move on to something else. So if you're the kind of person who can start a project and go, this isn't working, then don't necessarily worry about that. But I always say, if you're going to do a daily show, do it for at least 2 weeks, maybe 4. Although I really only know 1 or 2 other people who do daily shows. If you're going to do it weekly, do it for a month or do it for 2 months. Make sure that it's a thing that you can do. Plus, it's just going to get easier for you as you do that. And that's my biggest advice. Also, make sure it is something that you actually, at the very least, are interested in. You don't have to love it, but you have to love talking about it. And
I've always had similar advice. I've told people, create 5, and your first episode that you launch to the world is your 5th one. And there's a reason for that. Another reason on that is your first 4 episodes, you're worried about the wrong things. Like, is this mic working? Am I recording my guest?
Right.
Little things. And you're not actually concentrating on the important things like the content of the show.
Yeah.
So there's the whole, if you've never podcasted before, hurdle to get over. And that is the create 4, throw them away. 5th episode's the first one. Go out to the world with 1. Don't go out to the world with 10. Some people will tell you, go out with 10 episodes on your feed. No, because one of the most important things in podcasting to grow a show is your audience. And if your audience isn't promoting your show, the show is not going to grow. It doesn't matter how good a marketing guru you are. There is no silver bullet. It's like movies. It's all word of mouth. And if you launch with 1 episode and you ask for listener feedback, people are going to feel that part of your show. But if you launch with 10 with no listener feedback and they come across your show, by the time they get to episode 11, they're already going to feel disconnected from you. Like, this isn't a show that really cares about the listeners. That I want to be part of a community. Those are the people that actually grow your show. So I always say launch with 1, ask, beg, plead for listener feedback. And make your audience part of your show.